All right, let's dive into something I think we all can relate to. Self-love. It's one
Yeah,
of those things, right? We hear it everywhere.
we do. But it's more than just a buzzword.
Yeah.
Like there's actual depth to it.
Yeah, for sure. It can be kind of tough to actually put into practice.
Absolutely. And I think this guide we're looking at today, mention source if possible, otherwise generally described as a guide to self-improvement, does a great job at breaking down some of the practical steps.
It really does. They have some interesting ideas on prioritizing self-care beyond just the typical bubble bath stuff.
Right. And it's funny you should say that because they actually address that head on. They're like, yeah, bubble baths are great and all, but what actually truly recharges you?
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's about figuring what really fills your cup, right?
Exactly. So for one person, it might be going for a run. For someone else, it might be like spending the afternoon at an art museum.
It's about recognizing what makes you feel good.
Exactly. And then, and this is key, actually making time for it.
Yes. Even when life gets crazy.
Yeah.
Prioritizing yourself.
Which kind of leads us to the next point, actually, setting healthy boundaries.
Oh, yes. Boundaries. So important.
Yeah, it's another one of those things that's like easier said than done.
Totally. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of trying to please everyone.
Right. And then you end up overcommitted and overwhelmed.
Exactly. So how do we actually set those boundaries?
Well, the guide suggests thinking about it like this. You wouldn't let someone constantly withdraw money from your bank account without ever putting anything back in, right?
That's such a good analogy.
Right. So it's the same with your time and energy. You have to protect those resources.
Okay, love that. So we're prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries.
Yeah.
But then there's that other part of the equation, that voice in our heads.
Oh, you mean the inner critic?
Yes.
Aha.
How do we deal with that?
Oh, that's a big one. And the guide has some super practical tips on challenging negative self-talk. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
I've heard of that, but I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, it's basically a way to retrain your brain to think more positively.
Interesting. So instead of beating ourselves up over every little thing.
Exactly. It's about learning to challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with more helpful ones.
So self-compassion is a big part of this whole self-love thing, right?
Huge. And that leads us perfectly to the next point, which is celebrating your accomplishments.
Oh, I love that.
Because we often downplay our wins.
Totally. We're so quick to focus on what we haven't done yet instead of what we have.
Right. So this is about taking the time to acknowledge and celebrate all the amazing things you've already accomplished.
Big or small.
Exactly.
That's so important. Okay, and the last point, I think, can be one of the toughest. Forgiveness.
Ah, yeah, forgiving ourselves. That can be a hard one.
Because we can be so hard on ourselves, really.
Totally. We make mistakes. It's part of being human,
Uh,
but we tend to hold on to those mistakes and let them define us.
and that just keeps us stuck, right?
Exactly. So forgiveness is about letting go of that past hurt and giving yourself permission to move forward.
Okay, this has been amazing. So many good points. But if you had to pick just one thing for our listeners to really take away from this deep dive, honestly, I'd have to say, remember that self-love is a journey, not a destination.
I love that. And as we wrap up, I think a great question for our listeners to ask themselves is, what's one small step you can take this week to show yourself a little more love?
Yes. What can you do to start being kinder to yourself starting today?
Awesome. Until next time.